It was December 27th, 2023, in Burngreave, Sheffield, a quiet post-Christmas morning. Chris Marriott, a 46-year-old father of two, was walking with his wife and children through the neighborhood. They were just out enjoying the fresh air. Just a few streets away, a wedding celebration had taken a dark turn. Tensions between two families, the brides and the grooms, had exploded into a street fight. The argument started over logistics, but by late morning it had escalated. Punches were thrown. People were screaming. Someone had already called the police. In the chaos, one of the bride's sisters, 28-year-old Hassan Jhangur, was knocked unconscious and left lying in the middle of the road. Chris didn't know her. He wasn't invited to the wedding. But when he saw someone on the ground, he did what he always did. He stopped to help. He told his wife to take the kids and head home. Then he walked into the scene and began tending to Nafisa. An off-duty midwife, Alison Norris, also stepped forward to help. At that moment, Hassan Jhangur, 25 years old, brother of the injured woman, arrived on the scene. Within seconds, he got behind the wheel of his white seat Ibiza, and then he drove, not away from the scene, not around the fight, straight through it. He hit 5 people, including Chris, Alison, Nafisa, his own mother Ambreen, and his new brother-in-law Hassan Khan. Chris Marriott was crushed beneath the vehicle. He died almost instantly. His body was pinned so violently that emergency responders had to tip the car just to recover him. The man who stepped forward to help was now gone. Hassan Jhangur didn't see Chris Marriott, or maybe he did. That was one of the biggest questions prosecutors would ask over the following year. What we know is this: Hassan arrived in the middle of a violent family feud. His sister was unconscious. His emotions were running high, and instead of checking on her, instead of calling for help, he got in his car. He didn't hesitate. CCTV footage played later in court showed the white seat Ibiza mounting the curb and accelerating. Not braking, not swerving, accelerating. In court, the jury was told that Hassan intended to cause really serious harm, not just to his enemies, but to anyone in his way. That included strangers, that included Chris, that included his own mother. When the car came to a stop, 5 people were injured. One of them was dead. One of them, a completely innocent bystander, had been crushed to death while doing the right thing. Police arrested Hassan Jhangur at the scene. And that's where the real story began, not in the street, but in the courtroom where justice was about to meet emotion head-on. The first trial began in early 2024. The prosecution came in strong. They argued that Hassan Jhangur didn't lose control. He made a choice, a violent, deliberate choice. They called it rage-fueled retribution. To the jury, the evidence was clear. Hassan used his car as a weapon. Dashcam footage, CCTV from surrounding homes, and expert forensic testimony all pointed to the same thing. The car mounted the pavement and struck multiple people without any sign of hesitation. But the defense painted a different picture. They said Hassan had panicked, that he was overwhelmed seeing his sister hurt, that the chaos clouded his judgment, that it wasn't murder, it was a tragic mistake. The jury couldn't decide. After days of emotional testimony, including from Chris Marriott's widow and the midwife who survived the impact, the verdict was inconclusive. The trial collapsed. The court ordered a retrial. And so the wait began. Chris's family, already broken, had to endure months more of delays, media coverage, and uncertainty. But justice wasn't done yet. The second trial began in summer 2025, over 1 year after Chris Marriott was killed. This time, the courtroom felt different. There was no shock left, no confusion, only quiet, focused determination, especially from the jury. The prosecution returned with the same evidence, but this time they leaned in harder. They showed the exact moment the car mounted the curb. They played the audio of the crowd screaming. They showed Chris's final moments, his body crushed beneath the white seat Ibiza, surrounded by broken glass and panic. The jury heard from Alison Norris, the off-duty midwife who had also been struck. They heard from Hassan's own family members, people he had hit with his car, his mother, his new brother-in-law. They all said the same thing. It wasn't out of control. He aimed. On July 9th, 2025, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty of murder. Guilty of 4 counts of attempted grievous bodily harm. The judge called Hassan's act a catastrophic decision carried out in rage. Chris Marriott's widow sat in the front row. She held her son's hands as the verdict was read. She didn't cry. She just nodded. Chris Marriott wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy or powerful. But to the people who knew him, he was everything. A devoted husband, a father of 2 boys, a Christian youth worker, a man who truly believed in kindness, in community, in helping strangers when no one else would. He gave his time freely to church programs and youth outreach. He was known in Sheffield as the man who always showed up for anyone, anytime. That's why what happened to him felt so cruel. He wasn't just a victim. He was a good Samaritan in the most literal sense, a man who stopped to help someone lying in the road and was killed for it. At the trial, his widow Kath spoke quietly but powerfully. She said, "Chris saw someone in need. That's who he was, and that's why he's gone." In the days after his death, the street where he died became a sea of flowers. Messages poured in from friends, strangers, even people who had only heard his story on the news. He wasn't a hero in armor. He was a regular man, and that's exactly why his loss cut so deep. Hassan Jhangur was 25 years old when he killed Chris Marriott. He wasn't a known criminal. He didn't have a violent record. But in a single moment, he crossed every line and destroyed multiple lives. He came from a family caught in conflict. That December morning, he had just arrived at his sister's wedding reception. What should have been a joyful celebration had already turned ugly. Relatives from both sides, the Jhangurs and the Khans, had gotten into a heated argument that spilled onto the street. By the time Hassan showed up, his sister Nafisa was unconscious on the ground. His emotions surged, but instead of kneeling beside her, instead of calling for help, he got into his car. According to the prosecution, Hassan didn't just lash out, he made a cold decision to settle the score, to retaliate against members of the Khan family. But in his fury, he didn't care who was in the way. He struck strangers. He struck his own mother. He killed a man trying to help. In court, he offered no real explanation, no apology, no moment of remorse that was captured in headlines. He simply sat, mostly silent, as witness after witness detailed the horror of that day. Hassan Jhangur may have started as a son, a brother, a wedding guest, but in less than 10 seconds, he became a murderer. This was supposed to be a wedding. 2 families, 1 celebration, a chance to come together and start fresh. Instead, it turned into a battleground. The Jhangurs and the Khans had a long history of tension. It wasn't just about the wedding, it was about pride, tradition, status, and unresolved grudges bubbling under the surface. On December 27th, 2023, everything boiled over. According to eyewitness reports, the fight began over something as petty as timing arguments about arrival schedules, photo sessions, and where people were allowed to park. But beneath that were deeper cracks, rumors of financial disputes, disrespect between in-laws, and personal insults traded for months leading up to the event. As guests began to argue, Fists flew. Within minutes, the fight had spilled into the street outside Burngreave Place. Women screamed. Men pushed and shoved. Guests started throwing punches. Some were knocked unconscious. By the time Hassan Jhangur arrived, the scene was chaos. And into that chaos, with emotions high and adrenaline spiking, he drove a car. The wedding that should have marked unity became the site of one of Sheffield's most shocking murders. One street, two families, and a man who had nothing to do with it dead. When emotions faded and stories blurred, only the evidence remained. The forensic investigation into the death of Chris Marriott was relentless and damning. Police recovered CCTV footage from multiple homes and shops surrounding the street in Burngreave. The angle was clear. Hassan Jhangur's white seat Ibiza mounted the pavement at speed. There was no sudden stop, no sign of swerving, only acceleration. Specialists analyzed the tire marks, or rather, the lack of them. There were no brake marks, no hesitation. The car followed a direct path into the group of people standing by Nafisa's unconscious body. Crash investigators confirmed what prosecutors argued in court. This vehicle was not out of control. It was being controlled as a weapon. Photos presented to the jury showed the damage not from impact with another vehicle, but with human bodies. The bonnet crumpled inward. The windshield shattered. The injuries matched the force. Chris Marriott had been pinned under the car, his body crushed. Alison Norris, the off-duty midwife, suffered lasting damage to her legs and spine. Even Hassan's own family bore the trauma. His mother, Ambreen, and his brother-in-law, Hassan Khan, were both hospitalized. The evidence was surgical, cold, undeniable, and it cut straight through Hassan's claim of panic. By the time forensics experts finished presenting, the courtroom was silent. Facts had taken over, and they pointed in one direction: only murder. Chris Marriott's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a shockwave. In the days that followed, the people of Sheffield, friends, neighbors, even total strangers gathered outside Burngreave Place. Flowers piled up along the curb, cards, candles, notes from strangers who'd never met Chris but felt like they knew him now. His church organized a vigil. Dozens came, many in tears. His name was read from the pulpit, not just as a victim, but as a man who lived what he preached: help your neighbor, protect the vulnerable, and don't look away. His wife, Kath, stood with their two sons. She didn't speak long. She just said, "He didn't deserve this. He just stopped to help." That line echoed across the country. Newspapers picked up the story. "Good Samaritan killed at wedding brawl" became a headline repeated over and over again. Radio shows, social media, national TV. Everyone asked the same question. How did we get here? How does a man doing the right thing end up crushed under a car at a wedding? The city of Sheffield held its breath as the court process unfolded, and when the guilty verdict finally came in, people didn't cheer. They just exhaled. Justice didn't fix anything, but at least it acknowledged what was lost. The courtroom is empty now. The cameras are gone. The headlines will fade. But for Kath Marriott and for her two boys, the loss of Chris isn't something they can switch off. It lives in the silence of the home, in the empty chair at the dinner table, in the walks they now take without him. Chris Marriott didn't ask for attention. He didn't plan to be a hero. He was a regular man, someone who saw a stranger on the ground and chose to help. And that choice cost him everything. Hassan Jhangur, the man behind the wheel, now faces a life sentence. The judge's remarks were clear. This wasn't an accident. It was a rage-fueled act of violence. A moment of fury that shattered 5 lives and ended one forever. There's no happy ending here. but there is something left behind. Chris's story is a reminder of how fragile life is, of how powerful small choices can be, and of how sometimes the greatest courage comes from simply doing the right thing when no one else will. As his widow put it, he didn't walk away, he walked toward the danger. That was my husband.